Welcome into the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast and YouTube channel. I am your host today, Sky Guasco. We're talking tight end rankings and comparisons with my man DT. Noah Fant back on the radar. Stick around. We're going live right now on the Razzball YouTube. What up, everybody? I'm your host, Sky Guasco. Nice to be back in the hot seat once again for my man, Bobby Lamarco. Swapping out the days, getting everybody rested and ready for regular season. We've got a couple preseason games under the belt. Very excited to have some real, I use that term loosely, football under the belt. We've got some of our star guys out there getting some reps, and of course, a lot of the backups, third stringers getting some rep now. A fun part of this type of season for me every year is seeing all the random names we don't always necessarily know. UDFAs, fourth round picks, backups of backups. You don't recognize them now. But week 10, 11, 12, 15, some of these names will start popping up again. So make sure you're paying attention. Before we get in too far, I'm your host today, Sky Guasco. You can find me on Twitter at Sky Guasco, SkyGuasco. Of course, make sure you're subscribed and following the Razzball Fantasy Football YouTube channel, as well as the podcast. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast in case you miss any of our live streams. You can double back, listen to it on a dog walk while you're working, putting away the dishes, what have you. Also, make sure you check out all of the latest articles, the rankings, our ADP tool. DT's Top 200 is officially released and fresh, hot off the press at football.razzball.com. Without any further ado, my man DT back into place. DonkeyTeeth at DonkeyTeeth87 on Twitter. My man, how you feeling?
I'm good, man. Thanks for the intro. And, there was one other thing I wanted to mention. So we've had a couple of hiccups with our podcast feed. And so, I don't know, probably the last month, we've been doing these kind of bite-sized shows, 20-minute shows, and they've been all going to YouTube, but none of them have been hitting our podcast feed. So we finally got it sorted out, and now we're going to be uploading, I don't know, probably like 3 or 4 of them a day. We don't want to spam everybody's feed too hard, but in case you are subscribed to the podcast and you haven't been getting them, and now you're getting a bunch, that's what's going on. So there are a bunch of old shows that are still relevant. We've gone through every position ranking. You guys are doing mock draft shows. What else are you doing on your shows, Sky?
Yeah, Bob and I have been breaking down mock drafts. We've also been doing, week 1 so far. We'll have week 2 after this one, of course, of preseason updates. I'm actually looking at the feed live right now, DT. Just dropping today, takeaways from week 1, the AFC edition. Takeaways from week 1, the NFC edition. Just covering half of the league at a time for these bite size. Top 10 dynasty buy lows for 2022. And of course, if you want to go back on a bunch of our rookie previews and things like that from previously in the season for dynasty purposes, all those are still uploaded. But as DT mentioned, unfortunately, we had a little bit of a hiccup in the system, but we're going to be pumping them all out. So shouldn't spam you too hard. Just make sure you subscribe. You can cycle through those, all these episodes, about 15, 20, 30 minutes at times, but you can pump about a bunch of them and get a lot of that content in as we get ready for the rest of draft season. Very stoked. DT, before we jump into our tight end comparisons, I want to remind everybody that you and I hopped on last week for the QB comparisons. You've done running backs and wide receivers over the summer as well. So again, all these backlogged on YouTube at the Razzball Fantasy YouTube page and, of course, on the podcast coming soon. Before we get into our comparisons, DT, just curious, you've been in a bunch of drafts. We just kind of wrapped up the Razzball. Very smooth, super fun. I'm excited about my team. What is maybe 1 or 2 highlights, lowlights, just kind of shocking developments or anything you've noticed while drafting this year, be it dynasty, redraft, best ball, anybody climbing the charts or falling off the charts or being forgot about or anything jump off the page with drafting specifically right now as we get down the home stretch of the next couple of weeks?
Player specific, no huge shocks. I guess if you go back through these shows that we've done on each position, the guys that I've highlighted as the ones that I like more than consensus, they are falling to an area that I end up drafting them on pretty much every team. I know that we both ended up with Miles Sanders, and so did Bobby. Mike Williams, I end up getting in a lot of drafts because I'm super high on him. DK Metcalf, tight end, we'll go over who it is that I keep ending up at that position. but no huge shocks to me there. I think that, and it's really, this is not a huge surprise either, but the big takeaway for me in these deeper drafts and best ball drafts where we're going, 22 to 25 rounds, running back gets pretty darn sketchy at the back end of the draft. And receiver, there's still a bunch of guys that I'm more excited to take dart throws on. I think my strategy, as it has been in the past couple of years, is lock up running back and maybe a little bit of depth in the first half of the draft, and then focus on wide receiver depth and filling that out later is kind of my preferred method. I don't like to get too much tunnel vision on a strategy. I kind of go with the flow. And if certain drafts might be different than that, they're not all going to be the same, but it's pretty rare that I get into the last couple rounds of a draft and there's any running back that I really want on my roster.
Right. Sometimes in deeper PPR leagues, you can get away with certain guys who just might catch a handful of passes. Of course, you're in handcuff land at that point, deep rookies just in case. But I agree with you. You need to make sure that the running back is ready to go. And of course, always look at your roster settings. I'm in a draft right now where you only have to play one running back every week, just one. So you get a stud running back, but then I don't have to draft 5-6 rando guys. I can wait because I only have to draft or start one running back every single week with 3 wide receivers and a bunch of flex. So make sure you're paying attention to your roster settings as well. All right, DT, let's get into our tight end rankings and comparisons. Of course, we're going to go through your rankings specifically, talk about a couple of guys that you and I are just differentiating on at the tight end position. I'll let you kick off every guy, and I'll kind of have a little bit of a reply either way on that. Let's kick it off. He was the star of our show in the graphic here. Let's go right up here to number 8. That's right, folks. This is not a typo. Number 8 on the charts for DT, Noah Fant of the new Seattle Seahawks here. Coming in at number 8, I've got him down at 21. Let's start it hot here.
Wow, you hate Noah Fant, don't you?
I don't hate him. I don't like Drew Lock. I don't like Geno Smith. I don't like the Seahawks passing attack, which was least pass attempts in the entire NFL last year with Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett still there with the run-first offense. I'm out.
Yeah, so this is going to, and I think that this is kind of, when you look at my rankings as a whole, there are going to be certain like themes. I like teams and offenses more than other people do. So, I mean, you see, I'm like insanely high on DK Metcalf relative to the consensus. So it's really the same kind of thing with Noah Fant and to a lesser extent, Geno Smith. I'm not like excited to have Geno Smith on my team unless it's a 2 QB or a super flex league. I think that there is some real value in him there. Now, I could be totally off base here, and he could not even be the starting quarterback come week 1 or 2 or 3. It could end up being Drew Lock, but I've really got a good feeling about Geno Smith this year. I've said it before, I loved what I saw from him last year in his stint filling in for Russell Wilson before he himself got banged up a little bit there in one of those games. But yeah, I'm really excited about the Seahawks offense. I think it's getting totally overlooked. I think they're still going to be a very polished team. Pete Carroll gets these guys ready to play, and it's also one of those situations where I think he could be an awesome guy to acquire on your waiver wire after a couple of weeks, because it's become more common knowledge in recent seasons. But Pete Carroll, he can treat the first few weeks of the season as like an extended part of the preseason, still trying to get his team in game shape and not necessarily super concerned about results. So they may not look very good in the first couple weeks of the season as they, get their system refined and polished and all of that. But that doesn't mean they're not still going to be a really good competitive team. So that's just another thing to consider here. Again, this is a season-long ranking. So even if he starts slow, I think Noah Fant, his athleticism, his upside is really right there with the best in the league. Kyle Pitts, Hawkinson, Kittle, Kelsey, all those guys. He's right there with them. The potential is there. I think getting out of Denver could be just what the doctor ordered. And, Geno Smith, he's probably not going to be like throwing 50-yard bombs. So having that kind of safety blanket in Noah Fant could be super useful too.
Fair, good take. And honestly, over the whole summer, DT, I think that's the best take pro Noah Fant I've heard all summer long, because what I just said early is like stuck in my head. I just can't get it out that I'm worried about the offense as a whole. This is tough. I do this every single summer, and Bob called me out on the last podcast that I say this all the time. There are a ton of players at each position in fantasy football that I love as individual players. I like Noah Fant as an individual player. And if he was on 30 other teams, he'd probably be in my top 6. But he's not, and I'm worried about the offense. And I will say this before we move on here, just to kind of throw you a bone back. He did have a career high in receptions last year, 90 targets for the second time in his career, just under 700 yards, and only 4 touchdowns. And he was still tight end 9 in PPR. So he played 16 games. So if you play 15, 16 games, you put in nearly a full season at tight end, and you just get basic average work, you're probably top 10. So I'll give you that. 21 is pretty disrespectful. I understand that. However, I think I'm just in still the development stage myself on some of these rankings, especially at tight end as summer develops, right? New team, new quarterbacks. What are they going to do? Running situation, Pete Carroll, yada, yada. By the end of the summer, he's probably top 15, 16. But right now, I just can't put him ahead of other guys that I know have for sure established roles. I think that's my issue.
Yeah, and I think tight end rankings at times they can kind of get kicked to the side as we like refine the important positions, important positions. It's like, they're just, I got my tight end rankings. I don't need to look at them again. And then it's like, they kind of just fall into the back of our mind. And then we start talking about it and looking at it. And it's like, yeah, maybe I am too low on this guy, which I'm sure there's going to be a couple of those as we go through these in the next 10 minutes here.
I totally agree. You're higher on Noah Fant than I am. You're lower on this next player, not by much, but you are lower. Let's talk about Zach Ertz. You have Zach Ertz at 11. I've got him at 7. For me, I'll just make it quick. Nuke is out for 6 games. That's going to matter. Love Hollywood with the deep threat, but underneath, I think Zach Ertz is going to get a lot of work. Back to 2017 when he super duper broke out for the Eagles. Tight end 3, tight end 2, tight end 2, tight end 33, obviously, when he got hurt. But back to tight end 6 last year, first year in Arizona. So I think Kyler and he can do a lot of work. Why are you a little bit lower on Zach Ertz?
I guess I don't feel low on him. I really like the Cardinals offense, even without Hopkins, and there's definitely going to be some opportunity there. I guess if there was a reason, I mean, Kyler hasn't historically utilized the tight end position like super heavily, right? So I guess if there's an argument against him, it's that, but the difference between number 7 and number 11 is pretty minimal to me. So I think that I'm pretty bullish generally on Ertz, and maybe this difference in ranking is not as much as it seems.
Fair enough. And just again, going over these stats, Zach Ertz actually played a full season last year, which surprises me as I look into it, just because he's 32 now, which in football world is old, not really for tight ends, but just kind of across the board. But he hadn't played a full season since 2018. And then before that, 2013 and 14. So the fact that he was able to stay healthy, he had over 10 yards per reception. Love that. 5 touchdowns, right? And again, 112 targets with DeAndre Hopkins, right? But, we'll see what happens with this running game and Kyler Murray coming back healthy this year. And I think he's going to be a boom. Obviously, I think we're kind of flipped a little bit on Noah Fant and Zach Ertz, but that's why we do these. All right, let's move on to somebody that I'm really excited about this summer, and I'll give my spiel here in a second. But Cole Kmet, I think a polarizing player for a number of reasons. A, he's on the Bears, and I know you are a Bear, so I'll let you kick it off here. But he's on the Bears. Not sure what that offense is going to look like. Also, he had 0 touchdowns last year, and I know guys like us who nerd out on this stuff 24/7 realize that's not the end of the world. Let's not forget about Melvin Gordon, who scored no touchdowns as a rookie and then was a top 5 running back for 5 years consecutive after that. But it is a factor, right? So you're a little bit lower on Cole Kmet. You've got him at 16, which is basically out of the draft zone as far as tight ends go in regular non-premium leagues. I've got him up at 11. He's borderline top 10 for me. So why are you not so excited about Cole Kmet?
This is probably going to be one that you could make the argument that he's very similar to Noah Fant in the sense that I'm not excited about my Bears offense, and Justin Fields is probably going to utilize the safety blanket quite often, and there should be plenty of opportunity. There's not exactly a lot of superstars in that offense to compete with for touches, especially in the receiving game. So I definitely see the case for Komet, and this is kind of one of those things where my bias against my team is showing, and we've talked about that when I ranked Justin Fields quite low relative to the consensus, and I've also got Darnell Mooney quite low relative to the consensus. So maybe one of those things where I am too low, but I really have no issues with having him at 11 either. Again, the gap between like 11 and 16 is not great. It was one of those things where, I start weighing him against each of these guys I got ahead, and it's like, I like Albert O slightly more with Russell Wilson. I like Irv Smith bounce back a little bit more. I think where it really gets tough for me is like Dawson Knox, Mike Gesicki. I've got one spot ahead of him. Yeah, I could definitely see drafting Cole Kmet over those guys. So I love the potential of Kmet. Kind of like you said about Fant, it's an offensive thing, which it's a double-edged sword, almost hypocritical on my part. But we got to take our stances on these guys one way or the other, right?
100%. And I totally feel you on that. I think that's what's so important about rankings. And of course, you've mentioned a couple of times, you take your rankings with a grain of salt, but ultimately, in order to rank, you have to put somebody in front of somebody else. So if you're saying like my tight end 8 to 16 are like the same dude, but I have to put them in order somehow. And I respect that, especially a quarterback and tight end. That happens a lot in the middle groupings. The top guys separate themselves, obviously, and the bottom guys we just don't know about. But that middle grouping in both positions happens a lot. So I respect that. It just comes down to like you start doing that nudge, like 14 to 15 to 16 to 12. On draft day, you then look at your draft sheet and you're like, am I really going to go Mike Gesicki over Cole Kmet? And I have Mike Gesicki higher, but like, am I actually going to pull the trigger? And I think that's where you start going into tiers and your actual draft. And so that's why we talk about it here. For me, Cole Kmet is, I think, going to be a bright spot on the other side of Darnell Mooney in an offense that just doesn't have much. I like David Montgomery, but I think he's going to lose work to Khalil Herbert. I think they're going to kind of eat each other this year. Justin Fields is going to improve as a runner and a passer this year. They have a brand new offense, essentially, and whole new coaching scheme and all that. So I think the Bears are getting a fresh start as a franchise, which I think is great for you and, everybody in Bears land. Cole Kmet, I think, is going to be a bright spot at a position. Again, we just saw that with Noah Fant. If he can get 70 receptions, 700 yards, and 5 touchdowns, he's probably top 10. That seems easy to me with Cole Kmet, even though he didn't score a touchdown last year. I just put up an article. It's going to be dropping here on the website. Once again, football.razzball.com. All of our articles from all of our incredible writers. I just dropped one here about the top 5 at each position, not to forget about. Maybe disappointing last year, bring them back this year. We get a fresh start for whatever reason. Cole Kmet was one of the guys in my tight end column that I'm dropping here because he was top 12 among tight ends in targets, target share, receiving yards, air yard share, and there's no depth chart outside of Darnell Mooney. Velus Jones is fun, I guess, but he's not going to be a stud right off the bat. So again, high floor, which I like at tight end, high ceiling, and somebody that you can draft way late. Those are tight ends that I like to target if I don't go for one of those big dogs. So for me, I do like Cole Kmet, and I do expect quite a bit of a bounce back, but I hear your take as well. All right, let's get into another polarizing player. I think this is one of those players, man, I'll just be real. There are some guys in fantasy I've been playing forever, right? Some guys in fantasy after 5-6 years of just like breaking your heart, you're like, you know what? It's a tough breakup. I just need space. It's not you. It's me. We can't do this anymore. And I have to be honest, Evan Engram is a guy like that for me. I drafted him super high 3 years in a row, burned me 3 years in a row, and it's been tough to get over. Last year was a dud. The year before that was a dud. Comes to Jacksonville, which I expect an increase in that entire offense, but I still can't drink the Kool-Aid. He is way off my board. He's at 27, which is not even touchable for any tight end format. You have him at 17. In premium leagues, in high upside leagues, in best ball drafts, in bonus leagues where a guy like Evan Engram and that athleticism could really boost for you and win a week potentially with a big game, that is a player you might be targeting super late in your draft. I'm totally out, bro. I can't get past it. Please sell me on Evan Engram.
Well, I think this is a kind of funny like peek behind the curtain here on our show because like we're totally winging it here. Like we did virtually zero prep for this show. So it was like right before we
More fun
started,
that
we're
way
like,
with
hey, what are we going to
rankings,
talk
though.
about?
It's more fun with rankings. Yeah.
Yeah, we're like, what are we going to talk about? You're like, oh, Evan Ingram. You've got him like way higher than I do. I'm like, I do? Where I got him? 17. That's not, you know, it's like at this point in the draft, I guess, Sky, at this point in the draft, like you said, we're just taking dart throws on upside. It's like we're not actually going to draft Evan Ingram in a home league where there's 12 teams and a normal size bench. So
Let's just move it then. You're right. Let's move it then. Let's just talk dynasty real quick. He's still young. The Jaguars are looking a lot better. He's got Trevor Lawrence, and Evan Ingram might be a little higher in dynasty rankings per se, but like as a player, you just feel better as a player. Forget the ranking. You feel better as a player than I do about Evan Ingram a little bit. So just curious how you feel about that.
and I don't know if I do because I'm totally on board with everything you said about a guy burning you, and he has burnt me. And so it's like I don't want to dive back in, but then when I compare him to like who else do we got here? Well, and Njoku, I think, is another guy that you mentioned talking about, or Hunter Henry. I just still see that dream of Evan Ingram, and now he's with this young budding quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, where maybe it finally happens, that post hype breakout. I could see that narrative playing out. I don't want to get over invested in it. I'm not like aggressively looking to buy him in dynasty, but his owner might be feeling like you. So why not throw a buy low? And you know, if you can get him for like fab or like a future 4th round or
Yeah.
back end 3rd, maybe even, why not? Why not take a shot if you need a second tight end on your team? He's the kind of guy that could just totally shock us this year and be the tight end number 5. That we know that's in there. Not going to bet on it, but it's worth investing in at the right price.
He was tight end number 4 as a rookie in 2017, played 15 games. This is with Eli Manning, 700 yards, 6 touchdowns, tight end 4. Could he have that much? I don't know in Jacksonville because they have a lot. They also, they have Dan Arnold too, who I don't love Dan Arnold, but he's a quality tight end. He also blocks very well. And Bob and I have talked about this over the years. That's nothing we care about in fantasy, obviously. But what it does is it keeps those players on the field all the time because they can block. So if Dan Arnold leaves and he's off the field and Evan Ingram comes in, the defense is probably going to go, it's a pass. And you can't be predictable in the NFL, as we know. So Dan Arnold's going to be on the field a lot just so to keep him off guard. Evan Ingram notoriously is not a great pass blocker, and a run blocker. So unfortunately, that bothers me a little bit. I think you're totally right, man. Robert Tunyon's down here, right? I mean, Tyler Higbee, Molly Cox, Austin Hooper. A lot of these guys you're not going to draft in a regular league. I just want to bring up some of the deeper names because not a lot of shows do that. And I find myself thinking like, I wonder what anybody thinks about Gerald Everett. Like, I think there's something there. What does anyone else think? And I can never find people going a little bit deeper. So I can feel you there. But unfortunately, he's been declining in PFF rankings at the position. Hopefully gets a fresh start with Evan Ingram. One more player here, then I'm going to turn it over to you for a free flow. So just kind of get in your mind maybe 1 or 2 players we haven't talked about. You want to just kind of stand out as we close the show. Before we do that, though, I just want to kind of mention another guy that you're probably not going to draft. Bob brought him up recently, though, on his own pod, and I got me thinking, oh, yeah, Logan Thomas. Drafted as a quarterback by the Cardinals, turned into a tight end just a couple years ago, still young and developing, came out of nowhere 3 years ago and became the tight end 4. He was hurt last year, coming back. He's now with the Washington Commanders. Carson Wentz loves his tight ends. Again, not a guy that I'm drafting, but maybe DT, we have a totally different mindset with these guys. The Cole Kmets, Evan Ingrams, Hunter Henrys, Robert Tunyon, David Njoku's, whatever. You're not drafting them. Week 5, a guy gets hurt, you need a streamer. A bye week, you need a streamer. You start looking at matchups. You stream tight ends in the home leagues with 12. I think these are the type of guys I'd be looking for week on, week off. Just keep an eye on Logan Thomas. That's all I'm going to say. Great season a couple years ago. Carson Wentz loves his tight ends. Do you have any thought on Logan Thomas? If not, feel free to cherry pick 2 other players anywhere on your draft board. Could be at the very top, the very bottom, in the middle. Somebody you just want to kind of make a mention, pro or con, for this player before we close out.
Yeah, so Logan Thomas would have been one of those 2 for me. I really do like Logan
Nice.
Thomas. I think I ended up with him in Razzball as my second tight end. We've seen the upside. We know his athleticism. The guy, if he can stay healthy, he can be a tight end 1 easily. And I think this is the perfect these guys that we're talking about right now, Evan Ingram, Logan Thomas, your Gerald Everett, Cole Kmet even. This whole range of guys is the exact reason why fading tight end and not over investing in that position at the expense of running back or wide receiver is such a viable strategy, because one of these guys is going to be probably like tight end 6 at the end of the season. One of these guys that we've got ranked down here, like between 15 and 25.
Yep.
So somebody's going to blow up and you're going to be able to get him for free. If you hit on that guy, that's so valuable that you didn't spend an early round draft pick on, Mark Andrews or something like that, who could dud, so these guys aren't exactly safe even up at the top. That's why it's such a popular strategy. And I really do like Logan Thomas to answer your question. Hard to trust him fully with his, health issues and all that. But I do think that he's a great flyer in deeper leagues and definitely somebody to keep on your radar if you're playing that tight end streaming game, which a lot of people do.
Totally agree. In my article, the tight end article I just mentioned, I made a little quip and you had just hit it. I just want to put some numbers behind it. George Kittle, Zach Ertz, Darren Waller, right? Mark Andrews. Those guys were drafted a 10th round or later in their breakout season. They were these guys we're talking about right now. We're like, you're not going to draft Evan Ingram, but like, what if? Well, they were the what ifs. Okay. Nobody saw it coming. Bam, they blew up. Furthermore, Robert Tonyan, Logan Thomas were not even drafted in 2020 when they both became tight end 3 and 4 in their respective seasons, right? So you're right. 2 or 3 of these guys are going to be top 10. It's a matter of looking and predicting the offense, the flow there, and catching a little luck, obviously. And it's always tight end heavy with tight ends. DT, anybody else you want to mention before we get out of here?
No, I mean, I like Tonyan too, but yeah, I think we've licked it pretty well. It's just, if you're playing that game and you're not investing early, just keep an eye out for that early season breakout. We're gonna know, like Darren Waller, we knew very early in the season, like, yep, he's breaking out. So it's gonna happen.
19 targets last year in week 1 for Darren Waller. So fabulous. As long as he can stay healthy, they should be looking good. All right. Another one in the books here for the Razzball team. I'm your host, Sky Guasco, SkyGuasco on Twitter. Of course, you can find my man DT, DonkeyTeeth87 on Twitter as well. And the man, Bobby Lamarco, also the head honcho here, stepping aside for the day, enjoying a weekend. But we got him covered up. Here's been another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football YouTube channel and podcast as well. Make sure to go check out all of our latest articles, our ADP tool. DT's top 200 rankings have just dropped out here at football.razzball.com. Subscribe to the channels and the podcast as well. We'll catch you next time. Hope you enjoy your weekend and preseason week 2. For my man DT, I'm your host, Sky Guasco. We are out of here.